Good day, dear learners. I welcome you in the part 2 of this lecture related to architecture. So, this is in continuation with the previous lecture that I talked about regarding the temples. So, let's see what you're going to learn today. In this particular session, you will identify what were the key architectural features of Indian palaces, fort, mosque, and monuments, and illustrate the evolution of the palace and fort architecture through relevant examples from different dynasties. And lastly, you will be also able to compare and contrast the two major architectural styles, the Rajput and the Mughal, in terms of design, in terms of purpose, and the cultural symbolism. So let's begin with palaces. So it's everybody's dream, right? All the girls already have this dream of living in palaces. So palace architecture, you can say that it is of the highest peak of architecture of for centuries along the way. So the first use of many new forms and styles in architecture, mainly in the building of the palaces, was just not accidental, and proved that these buildings were made with great importance with great care and with great purpose. So the main reason why the palace architecture is not only of architect but also of other sphere. So we find that there are palaces which are built by rulers and feudal lords for centuries, and they have always been based on the architecture of life and activity in accordance with the different law of beauty, and it also demonstrated power within this architectural buildings. So India palaces reflected its deep-rooted cultural heritage. And with history dating back to ancient civilization, the country also witnessed there was a rise and fall of many numerous dynasties. And each dynasty, they left their imprint, their unique architectural landscape. So the fusion of indigenous style, which with many influences from Central Asia, Persia, and Europe, it gave birth to a diverse range of palaces design that captivates the imagination. So the history of India, from ancient to medieval to modern, has made the country what it is today, a fascinating combination of history with religion, right? So, Indian palaces earlier, if you look into the history, it was more commissioned by the royal families, right, who sought to establish the grandeur and the power. From the Maharaj of Rajasthan to the Nizams of Hyderabad, all played a very pivotal role in constructing the opulent spaces that served as a symbol of their authority. Now, the architectural display in Indian palaces is nothing short of awe inspiring. The intricate carving, the vibrant frescoes, the domes, the minarets, they all create this visual spectacle that transports visitor, like to a bygone era. So the fusion of various architectural style, which includes the Mughal, the Rajput, the Dravidian, and even the Indo-Saracenic, it showcases the adaptability and creativity of India architecture over the centuries. Moreover, a very interesting thing to note is that even religion had a very important role to play in shaping India's history, and how religion, the temples, palaces, and fort, they all coexisted in very close proximity. And it symbolizes the inseparable, you can say, connection between the secular and the divine. So the striking example is the city palace in Jaipur. So the India's fascination with palaces is in the ability to preserve and showcase the whole myriad threads of the history. So no doubt it is very awe-inspiring by looking at the palaces, how they were built. And imagine, and they were built at that particular time period in which we had no high advanced technology there, and how manual power was so skillful enough to create such beautiful architectural marvels, right? Then coming to the history of palaces, how the history of palaces is a reflection of India's, you can say, rich cultural heritage, the architectural grandeur and the royal, you can say, legacy is depicted by it. So even in the ancient India, The Indian rulers did build palaces made of wood, mud, and brick, and these early structures had survived. There were some literary, you can say, sources like in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, and accounts of travelers such as Megasthenes, who describe the grandeur of royal residence as well. So even the Mauryan capital of Pataliputra, that is modern Patna, it had impressive palaces which was described by Megasthenes as being compared to those of Persia, with gilded pillars and ornate carvings as well. Then in the early medieval period, we saw the kingdom of the Pallavas, the Cholas, how their palaces and architecture began to evolve in southern and western India. And the intricate carvings and the Dravidian architectural features was also the prominent features in the South India. And palaces of Badami and Chola palaces, it reflected royal lifestyle of this area. Then coming to the Sultanate period. With the establishment of the Delhi Sultanate, a lot of Islamic influence began to get blended with the architectural tradition. So it had featured domes, the arches, the minaret, the courtyard, which introduced Persian and Central Asian aesthetic. And these palaces were built using red sandstone, which was a very typical feature in the medieval period, which emphasized symmetry and geometry also. So the Mughal period, that between 16th to 18th century, it marked the golden age of palace architecture in India. So with the you can say exquisite gardens, which were the Persian charbagh, that is four-part garden concept, that was also a typical feature. So palaces were a part of a grand fort complex, right? So notably, the notable examples are the Agra Fort, the Fatehpur Sikri, the Red Fort, and we can see the Mughal palaces, how the craftsmanship was, harmonized. You can see the harmony between the Persian, the Timurid styles, which was characterized by domes, arches, and the Petra Dura work, and the flowing water channels as well. Then the Rajput and Maratha period. So in the princely state of Rajasthan, the Rajput rulers, they constructed grand palaces that reflected valor and opulence. And they too had they were situated in hilltops, which was near, usually in the lake for strategic and aesthetic purpose as well. So the prominent example is the city palace of Jaipur, Udaipur's lake palace, and the Mehrangarh fort of Jodhpur, that all, and even the city palace in Udaipur, it exemplifies the combination of defensive and decorative architecture. Now you can see also in the image the beautiful palaces at that time. So now, what was the unique feature, or what constitute the palace? What did they exactly emphasize on? So first, the striking feature, if you look at all the pictures of the palaces at that time, or the time, in the different time period, were the arches. Arches, it was the dominant feature and the elegant feature of the palace architecture, right? So they serve both as a structural and decorative purpose, helping distribute the weight of the heavy ceiling and allowing for large opening that makes the interior more spacious. There were different type of arches which were developed over time. The pointed arches are characteristics of Islamic Mughal palaces, while cusped and horseshoe shape are popular in the Rajput architecture. And these arches were often richly decorated with carvings, the floral motifs, the colored inlay, which shows the artistic skill of the craftsman during that period. And it added the ornamental beauty to the palaces. Then came the domes. How the domes were the primarily, you can say, the Islamic and Mughal influences. Integral element. It soon became also an integral element in the Rajput and Indo Saracenic design as well. So the dome, it provided weight, it provided height also. The dome, it provided height. There was a lot of attraction when the dome was there, ventilation, and of course aesthetic sense. And they served as a visual centerpiece of the palace complex. And it was bulbous, like an onion-shaped domes that was commonly used in the Mughal architecture, and such as those of Red Fort and Fatehpur Sikri. The graceful curves and elevated silhouettes, this kind of contributed significantly to the royal identity of palaces, making them both monumental and also symbolic. Next is the courtyard. Now, courtyard, it was the heart of palace architecture. How it was the open air spaces were surrounded by halls, chambers, and galleries, which ensured natural light, ventilation, and there was a sense of openness. And the courtyard also was used for social gathering, for any ceremony, celebration. And some palaces they featured multiple courtyard also. Some were reserved for public activities, some were reserved for private gathering of royal families. So the striking example is of the City Palace in Jaipur and the Zenana courtyard of Mehrangarh Fort, which reveal the aesthetic and the social importance of these spaces. Then came the gardens. How gardens were also, it symbolized, paradise, tranquility, peace, and harmony with nature and architecture. And it was influenced by Persian and Mughal tradition. The charbagh style of the garden layout, which divides the area into four parts with pathways of water channels, which became a very popular design. Then the palatial gardens were decorated with fountains also. There were a lot of fountains in the in between the gardens, and there was also lotus pond, shaded terraces, flowering plants, all contribute to the sense of luxury and peace. So the notable example included the Shalimar Bagh in Kashmir and the Garden of the Red Fort in Delhi, both reflecting the royal fascination with nature, order, and beauty. Then came the mirror work, Sheesh Mahal, Aina Kari or the Sheesh work, which also added a lot of splendor to the interior of the palaces. Now, this technique involved, how they used to place small mirrors into the plasters or marble walls, which created, a dazzling reflection of light. So all you have to do is light one candle, and the reflection used to, hit all the mirrors, and it used to illuminate the palaces. So the mirrors they were cut, and it was not normal mirrors; they were cut into floral or geometrical shapes, and they were paired with colored glass and gold leaf to enhance the decorative effect. So the striking example is Sheesh Mahal in Amir Fort in Jaipur, the Moti Mahal in Bikaner, how it illuminated the entire hall through thousands of shimmering reflections. Then the jalis, that's another very unique feature, that is the lattice screen. Okay, now here we use jali or net to protect ourselves from mosquitoes and things like that, right? But then at that time, the jalis they were carved with stone and wooden panels, and they were used in palace architecture. Of course, the main purpose was they wanted proper ventilation, light also to come in, enter the room to make it more cool, and also at the same time it was combining beauty, privacy, and also comfort. And it was basically the practical solution that they found during that time, right? And also the jalis, it offered privacy, especially for the royal women who observed parda, and they did not want them, others to see them. So it was behind the jalis that they used to observe um, the world on the other side. So artistically, jali is also featured. It was not a normal jali; it was done in geometrical, floral, you can say patterns that demonstrated the skill of the local artisans, right? The Hawa Mahal in Jaipur is one of the finest example, with hundreds of jali windows forming its iconic view that you can see in the Hawa Mahal. Now coming to the Rajput palace architecture, what was so different about that, or what was so magnificent about this particular palace? It was the valor, the grandeur, and the cultural richness. And of course, this was more in Rajasthan and central India, where the palaces reflected the royal lifestyle, cultural heritage, strategic genius of the Rajput rulers at that time. So the layout and structures were built on top hills within the fort or complex, showcasing both aesthetic and military strength as well. There were a lot of multiple courtyard, terraces, gardens, and there were multi-storied buildings were arranged around open spaces for ventilation and gathering. And when it came to material and style, They use sandstone, marble, granite for construction, and they also use intricate stones, carving, mirror work, and ornamental art in the ornamental arches. So there was a blend, you can say, of Hindu architectural tradition with later Mughal influences as well, which gave Rajput Palace a unique hybrid character. So the distinctive features are the jharokas, which is it's like a projection, enclosed balcony which offered view to the surrounding, yet maintaining the privacy, especially for the royal women. Then the chhatris, that was the dome-shaped pavilion built on the rooftops and terraces, mainly for decoration and as a lookout point as well. Then Zenana quarters, which was reserved for royal women, beautifully decorated and adorned and very uh, carefully designed for comfort and seclusion. Then the courtyards and halls, they were spacious courtyards which were connected with various sections like audience hall, which served administrative and ceremonial purposes as well. In contrast, if you look at the Mughal palace architecture, the layout and planning was a bit different. So they did also include the gardens, the courtyard, and hall of residence. That is Diwane Am and Diwane Khas. That was the name given to them. And the audience was Diwane Am and Diwane Khas for the private chambers. And there was a lot of use of geometric symmetry and axial alignment, which was basically the landmark of the Mughal design. And it created a sense of order, a sense of harmony. Then material and decoration, they used marble and red sandstone. Precious stones were also commonly used, intricate carving, petra dura, that is a stone inlay work, the jali, the lattice screen, and the calligraphy inscriptions adorned the walls and the ceiling. And all that was what? Reflecting Persian artistic influence. Then the gardens and the water feature was another important, you can say, it represented the Mughal palace. The Charbagh four-part garden, which lay out with fountains and the water channels and reflective pools. Now, these features added coolness, beauty, a sense of tranquility to the palace environment. So here are the different, you can say, the different images of the palaces. Of course, these images have with time we have like modified it for our use. We have modernized it. But just imagine at that time when it was built by the local artisans, how they skillfully carved those out. And right, even now, most of the palaces are either converted into hotels, tourist places, or they converted, many people, they go there for destination weddings, right? So look, even if when you look at the interior of the rooms, even if they have very decorative, curtains and very modern sofas and cushions and things like that, but just look at the walls. Look at how the whole lighting system is there, the ventilation is there. So that is still intact, and through that, these are the basic architectural, we can say, the palaces. It has a different story to tell, right? Forts. Now, that's another category of the architecture. Why fort was so important? And Indian fort were merely constructed for defense purposes. And it also was to display power, and authority as well. So it was a symbol of both glory and bloodshed at the same time. So if you look at the Indian literature, it dates back to Rig Veda, that it mentions fort by the name of Satbhuj, which translate to 100 moats. Now, these forts have been described as a massive structures of earthwork spread over a large area of land. So, the cities were guarded by the walls of these forts, which were called as pur. Traces of the architectural forts in ancient Vastu Diya can also be found. So let's look at the historical development of forts as well. So the early period, if you look at the Mauryan period, and earlier to that, Indus Valley civilization, how can we forget that? It also showcased the fortified settlement like the Harappan and the Mohenjo-daro, and the evidence of walls that were made of wood and bricks, that the fortified walls. And even in the Mauryan period, the forts were more organized, they became more strategically built. Then in the Kautilya Arthashastra, it mentions different types of forts, the Danwa, desert fort, Jala, water fort, and Parvata, that is the hill fort, reflecting an earlier understanding of the terrain-based defense system. And in the medieval period, we also saw the fort, they became more grander and more intricate, right? So hill fort like in Chittor and the Ranthambore, they were built with local stone blending with the natural surrounding for better defense. Now, these fort also included palaces, temples, they had their own water reservoir within their walls. Now, during the Islamic and the Mughal period, there was a new fortification style influenced by the Persian and the Central Asian architecture. So they are, you can say that they had more sloping walls, massive bastion, and arch gateways for enhanced protections. And the fort during the Mughal era, it became an architectural masterpiece combining military strength with aesthetic beauty, just like in the Agra fort and the Red Fort of Delhi. Then the regional kingdoms and later fort, that is the Deccan Sultanate and the Marathas, they also adapted according to their geography. So they have the Golconda Fort, the Bidar Fort, which even in the rocky terrains, how they were defending themselves. It became an architectural monument for defending, right? Then the colonial period, here, of course, the traditional forts were designed, slowly started declining. The traditional outlook started declining. Reason being because even the style of defending changed. The military, there was an advent of firearms and artillery. So the British and other European, the power, they constructed the fort according to their need. So just like in Fort St. George in Chennai and Fort William in Kolkata, they were designed to withstand cannon fire and serve as an administrative center. So you see, the way they fought the war, the kind of the arms and ammunition they used, that also had a role to play in order to how the fort is supposed to be built. So if you look at the features of the fort, of course, number one is the defensive wall. Every fort needs a wall to defend against the enemy and to withstand the enemy attack. So a wall often had the battlements, a parapet with openings. So where the soldier used to sit and they used to shoot from those, they used to observe and shoot from those parapets. Then, of course, a secret passage is always there, the hidden tunnels inside the fort for escape or for communication during enemy attack. Right, so these passages also help the rulers and the soldiers move unnoticed or transport supplies secretly. Then bastion is the watchtower, because they at that time did not have any computerized CCTV, right? So they used to be at the top, which allowed the soldiers to to look at the fort or look at the surrounding, the environment near the fort at the 360 degrees. So it gave a better visibility and it served as a strategic points for placing cannons or guards. Then even the gates, the entrance were so grand. They were reinforced with iron spikes to prevent the entry even of the war elephant or the battering ram. So some forts had multiple gates and they were arranged in zigzag manner in order to confuse the invaders. Then moat, a typical another feature of a fort, it was a kind of a ditch around the fort. So the moat with a deep water filled ditch, it kind of, it served as an extra line of defense against the enemy. Then parapet, you can see in this image, it's a low protective wall built along the edge of the fort. And this is where we find that during the war, the parapet is also used by the soldiers in which they can easily conceal themselves also. They can observe and they would want to attack. They can do it from the small openings in the parapet. And the parapet also they also had the decorative elements. It was beautifully decorated and became an important part in the architecture. So the role of forts in Indian history, of course, first is the military defense. They have to defend themselves against the enemy. So massive wall, bastion, moats, gateway, all that strengthened their defense. So soldiers were stationed to guard and monitor the surrounding area. So just like the Gwalior Fort, the Mehrangarh Fort of Rajasthan, it proved and it remained invincible and it witnessed many battles between the Rajputs and the Mughal. Then came the political power. It symbolized authority, strength, control over their territory, right? And even the grandeur of the fort, it reflected the prestige and the influence of the kingdom, just like the Red Fort um, and the Chittorgarh Fort in Rajasthan, right? It depicted Rajasthan or Rajput's pride and valor. Then also the fort, it became an economic hub. It was a center of trade, taxation, and economic administration. So it was built along important trade route, and it was also seen that the secure environment also encouraged a lot of merchants and artisans and traders to flourish under the royal protection, just like in Agra Fort and the fort in St. George, Chennai. Then came the enduring legacy. Now, these fort have left such a magnificent, you can say, symbol of India's history and cultural heritage. They represent centuries of architecture, brilliance, valor, and resilience. So, these enduring these monuments basically remind us of the country's rich tradition and strategist ingenuity, just like the Gwalior Fort and the Mehrangarh Fort. It is celebrated for its architectural grandeur and layered history, and it remains a major heritage attraction as well. Then, even the famous battles which were fought at the fort, and the history is the when we study history, these are the famous battles that were fought, and the fort were the epicenter of many of these battles, just like Battle of Chittorgarh, the Siege of Golconda, and the First War of Independence, that is the Cavalier Fort. It served as a strategic base during the rebellion against the British rule. And then the siege of Seringapatam and the siege of Chitradurga, they all were, the both of them, they showcased how it became such an important epicenter of many historic battles. And that those battles were actually, it kind of, shaped our Indian history. And we're still studying about it today. So to conclude, though we have only looked into an aspect of, you can say, fort and palaces in India, but there is so much to uncover. So you see that Indian architecture, even though it is, we saw the forts and how it embodies the country's glorious history, the artistic excellence, and the cultural diversity, but each structure, it stands as a narrative. It is telling a story of power, of devotion, and creativity. And it is also reflecting the confluence of indigenous traditions and foreign influences as well. So these architectural marvels not only deepens our understanding to India's past, but is also inspiring us a, a kind of a renewed appreciation. It's developing a renewed appreciation in us for its enduring legacy that continues to influence modern architecture and heritage preservation today, right? So I hope you like this session of today's, in which we specifically talked about the palaces and the fort, right? So these are the suggested reading for more detailed view regarding, if you want to have a more detailed, comprehensive view regarding the architecture, especially the palaces and the fort. So with this, I come to the end of the session, and till I meet you again with another topic, with another interesting topic related to our Indian ethos. Till then, take care of yourself and have a nice day. Bye bye.